Poll question today. Who or what are you most worried about with the Canucks? Andrei Kuzmenko, Elias Pettersson, defensive depth, or feel free to go off the board other and specify in reply. We will put that to our next guest. Rinkwide's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, after a busy weekend that was, and we'll look ahead to the week ahead here with the Canucks back at Rogers Arena. First, answer me the poll. Where's your greatest concern right now?
Yeah, I think it has to be Elias Pettersson. Guys, he played 24 minutes and 9 seconds on Saturday, second most ice time of the season, over 10 minutes of that third period, delivered the huge hit on Calen Addison. And I know everybody's looking for injuries. That doesn't strike me as a guy that is playing through a core issue to be able to play that much, to launch himself into Addison the way that he did. But I come back to the evidence presented, and that is the fact that he's passing up shots right now. He's got the one goal in the last 9 games. And beyond that, he has 14 shots on goal in his last 8 hockey games, like not even 2 shots per game. And when you see Quinn Hughes taking 16 shot attempts, that tells me that, I think they recognize that Pettersson's not a shooting option right now. And so I know on Friday after the morning skate, Tocchet was asked about it. Pettersson himself kind of bristled to Farhan and said, "You guys are fishing. I hear that you're speculating." The Audace protest maybe a little too much in this situation. So something's going on there, but he's not the difference maker that he has been. And this is a guy that had 19 points in his first 10 games of the season. He had a 15-point lead on Connor McDavid in scoring on Remembrance Day. 2 weeks later, that's down to 4 points. McDavid obviously catching fire, but part of that equation is that Elias Pettersson is in neutral. And I know he's still among the NHL scoring leaders, but when you see the way he roared out of the gates and was dominant on a lot of nights and, impacts the game and the two-way game, there's just a lot going on, or maybe it's a lot that's not going on with Elias Pettersson right now that I am a little concerned, because you think back to the all-Canadian division with no fans in the stands, where the wrist ultimately was an issue that forced him to shut things down for the season. I'm not hearing any I want to be clear about that. I'm not hearing any suggestions that that's where this is going, but there has to be an explanation for this great stall out in the month of November, because this guy was packing on the points. He was the league leader not that long ago. And right now, it just sort of feels like he's playing at half speed out there.
We're only speculating the wrist, and many noted that he's taping it now. Saw that on the bench,
but he's always taped it. I think
not according to some
the internet sleuths that are out there.
I saw Rachel Dory tweet that he's not always taped it. So I'm going to take her word on that. Okay, so let's just say it's the wrist. Play this out with me for a second. Why wouldn't you shut him down with such a big cushion? Like, why wouldn't you sort of give him some time? I know it's going to be hard to win without him, but you've got a cushion right now. It would be a damn shame to not have him in games if, in fact, you're sliding back to the pack.
Let me ask you this, though, guys. If he's injured and it's affecting him this much, why? I've never seen him play more physically than I have in recent. Like, are you throwing yourself at guys if you're feeling tender and play? Like, I don't know. It certainly feels like his offensive play is that of an injured player, and yet he is body checking and playing physically like we've never seen him do so before.
Right, but I do think that if he knows which area to protect, I mean, you can still lower a shoulder into a guy, or he loves the reverse hit as well. I think you can still do that and protect the area that needs protecting. Again, I'm not a doctor, and I have no evidence of this other than I've watched this guy at the highest of highs when he has taken over hockey games, and he's just not doing that right now. And it is a stark contrast from the month of October. So that's where my concern level. As for your question, Matt, about why not shut him down, I wonder if it's the kind of injury that, a week off wouldn't really do a lot for it. And, I trust that he's working with the team's medical staff here, and people can insert their own jokes there about, hand injuries and Tanner Pearson and everything else. But these guys have access to medical professionals and specialists. The Canucks know what Elias Pettersson means to them. I go back to the fact, too, that if he truly was hurt, you'd think that they would shut him down on practice days at the very least and try and keep him ready for games. That would be like the first step in this procedure. And he had the one maintenance day back on the 1st of November, the day before they went and walloped the Sharks 10-1. Other than that, he's been a regular participant in practice. So, it's sort of mixed messaging here, because if he's hurt, you'd think there would be some maintenance days involved. He says he's not hurt. So why has his play dropped off? That's something that he and the hockey club have to figure out here, because it does go hand in hand. When he was going, they were going. They were 12-3-1 at one point. They've now lost 4 of their last 6 hockey games.
Blake didn't like it from the beginning. I thought, okay, sit him down for the one game, but come right back with him on the second of a back-to-back. What did you make of the Andrei Kuzmenko benchings, plural, on the weekend, Jeff?
Yeah, I had no problem with the one on Friday in Seattle. I think it had come to that there was talk that they had thought about maybe doing it in Colorado, but the stakes were pretty high there. Not that they weren't against the Kraken. But look, Andrei Kuzmenko's brought this on himself. Like, his performance, the coaches fired shots across the bow. Things haven't changed here. Took the puck in the face and missed the one game. And I don't know if that goes hand in hand, but he was slowing down regardless. And certainly the game since he returned from the facial injury has been a non-factor. So I think he had put himself in the line of fire for the coach to make the move. And then I think Saturday's decision was based more on the performance of the guys that did play and played well and performed on Friday. I think Rick Tocchet just thought, I'm coming right back with the same lineup, and too bad for Andrei Kuzmenko. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, inject fresh legs. It's one guy. Like, maybe one guy with fresh legs can make a difference. But the way that he's been playing, he hasn't been a difference maker. So I hear those people that say that. I just think you have to go on recent form for Andrei Kuzmenko. And as electric as he was last year and scoring all the goals and the big smiles and having fun, there's been next to none of that. So I didn't really have a problem with Tocchet repeating the same lineup that he used on Friday with so much success. The problem was on Saturday, look who scored the goals. I mean, Besser had 2 and Hronek on the power play. There were 5 guys that found the score sheet on Saturday in San Jose. They were all the top of the lineup guys. The bottom of the lineup, all the cookies on Friday, and saved none for Friday. And look, you're not going to lean on your bottom 6 to win you a ton of hockey games, but there have been a few already this season. But it would have been nice to see somebody rise up to the challenge and help out. And I guess Sam Lafferty thought he had early when had the goal that was overturned there. But again, I just think it speaks right now to where the Canucks are, guys, that they pull the goaltender with 4 minutes to go, and Sam Lafferty is the extra attacker. And that's not a knock on Sam Lafferty. He's playing hard and he's trying to give them what he can. But at the outset of the season, if I had said 22 games in, the Canucks are going to be in San Jose trailing and needing a goal, and Sam Lafferty is going to be your extra attacker, you'd probably think, like, what in the world has gone on and what's gone wrong with this hockey club? So they just have, again, too many guys that, and it's not for lack of effort, but they've got to find a few other guys that are able to contribute here or there. They got it on Friday night. It would have been nice to see somebody else elevate their game a little bit.
And guys, this
I think it was Lafferty's reward for Friday night, but that's absolutely a spot you want Kuzmenko. You talk about it all the time.
This is where Rick Tocchet does fade back into old school, right? I mean, we praised him for being progressive in a lot of ways, despite some old school rapping.
And
this
Blake,
is old
he has
school.
changed a winning lineup in the past, he has also changed a lineup on a back-to-back, understanding that.
That's right.
Regardless, and I hear Jeff's point. It's one guy, but one is better than none.
Bottom 6 guys are bottom 6 guys for a reason. Their inability to be consistent over the course of their careers is why they find themselves where they find themselves, and expecting them to come back on the back-to-back nights, I think was fool's gold a little bit. And the Canucks just needed another skilled player in the lineup versus the San Jose Sharks, and they fell one short, obviously. So
right, and I nobody was worried about it with the result or the process on Friday. They win 5-1 because Kuzmenko lesson, a message sent, and we'll see if the lesson ultimately is learned here. But you're right; it comes down to a game where you're chasing on Saturday, you're down a goal. There's a 39 goal scorer. Now he's not that same player this year, but when you get in the late stages, he still represents the idea of some offense better than a lot of the guys that Rick Tocchet had at his own disposal. So he's got to fall on his own sword. He made that decision. And yeah, maybe it came back to bite him just a little bit in that regard. That said, they weren't good enough. And, this idea of one guy in fresh legs at the end of this 10-game and 17-night stretch, 3 and 4, back-to-backs, everything else, the captain, I thought, had one of his best and most inspiring games of the season. And that's saying something for this guy that has been all world. He played 30 minutes, played 12 minutes of the third period when they were trailing, 16 shot attempts. If Quinn Hughes can dig deep and come up with that kind of effort, then why can't the rest of them? So
Mhm.
this idea of just plugging one guy in to be a difference maker, I think the answer is this is the worst team in the NHL they were facing. And I know the Sharks have played better of late and they're better at home. And they had played the night before, or at least the afternoon before. So a 2-2 game to the third period, it was all there on the table for the Vancouver Canucks. And they come through that 10-game stretch with a record of 5-5, which is reasonable and commendable. But 6-4 was right there on a platter for them. And for whatever reason, they let it get away and then, tried to chip away and battle back and got within one, but ultimately fell one short. So I like Tocchet's post-game approach. Like, he wasn't giving them a pass at all
Right.
on the travel and the tough schedule. And I wrote about this at Canucks Army on Sunday. Like, yeah, it was difficult. Like 8 different cities and 10 games. You know what else is hard? Playoff hockey is hard. Going a bunch of rounds in the postseason, that's difficult. And the good teams, they find a way to do it when the stakes are the highest. So this wasn't a playoff game. This was late November against the San Jose Sharks. But Tocchet saying, like, if they thought this was difficult, then, this is a group that doesn't have a lot of postseason experience, quite frankly, and really doesn't have a bar to measure against in terms of what's really tough at the NHL level. And so I thought, good on the coach. He was having none of that, pity party for them that, it was a lot of games and it was a lot of games. But you know what else? Of those 10 games they just played, one opponent in the top 10 in the NHL standing, and that was Colorado. So
and you know what else? You know what you don't get in the playoffs? You don't get the San Jose Sharks in the playoffs. So you're tired. You have all those same criteria, all the same circumstances, and you don't get to face the San Jose Sharks. You face teams way better. So that doesn't bode well.
And yet I thought his criticism of the team after the game was still reasonably narrow. I think he could have gone further. I think he chose not to. Can I ask you about Nils Aman? Because, boy, on Friday, Jeff gets called up, signs a 2-year extension, has a 2-point night. And my head is like, wow, the possibilities here. If this guy is ready to be an NHL centerman. Take me through Nils Aman's weekend, the first time we've seen him in Canucks colors this year.
Yeah, great afternoon for an evening to get the call for Nils Aman and get plugged right in there. And he was terrific. You're right. You know what sort of caught my eye right off the bat was he got plugged in as a penalty killer and ended up among the ice time leaders for the Canucks on Friday at Climate Pledge. Unfortunately, and maybe it speaks to the rigors of the NHL, as good as he was on Friday, he was pretty much non-existent on Saturday. And I'm not pinning the loss against the Sharks on Nils Aman, but he wasn't able to keep his game certainly at the level that it was in his season debut. I'm curious about where it goes from here for him, because at some point, Suter is going to return to this lineup. And when he does, he's going to be plugged right back in as the third line center. And Teddy Bluger is here now as well. So, Aman still profiles very much as a depth player on this roster in this organization. But there are things to like there in terms of his size. His skating is decent at the NHL level. I think there's an offensive ceiling, but to get 2 assists in his season debut, that was a nice part of the story as well. So, I think a mixed bag for him in the weekend, as it was for the hockey club, that he looked a part of this group on Friday against the Kraken. On Saturday, he was hard to find. And then in the third period, again, they leaned on other guys, and his ice time, as you can imagine, doesn't profile as a guy that's ever going to deliver a lot of offense, even though he had the 2 assists on Friday. So when you're down a goal and trying to mount a comeback, I wasn't surprised that he was one of the guys that was part of the group that saw the bench more than they saw the ice.
Defensively, do you want to see any rotation of the bottom of the defensive depth, or is the likes of Juleson that much better than the other options that are available to them?
Yeah, it's getting a little curious for me, just in as much as Kito Rossi got called up and he's played the one game on this call-up, and they continue to run out Juleson and Friedman. And those guys are trying. They're giving the Canucks what they can. But I think you saw on Saturday, guys, that the difference between having Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek on the ice, and on the ice a lot, just tilts the sheet in the Canucks' favor. And the difference then is what happens in those minutes when they're not on the ice, and that's when the Canucks run into trouble. And the first San Jose goal, it's Myers and Friedman are out there as a defensive pairing. Ian Cole's been a pretty nice story for the Vancouver Canucks, but he has his stick whacked by Mike Hoffman, basically puts the puck in his net and what turns into the game winner. So the questions continue here. Like, what are they going to do about this defensive group? Carson Soucy's not going to be back until after Christmas. And so are they going to ride with what they've got? They bring up Cole McWard. They had the back-to-backs. He thought maybe that was an opportunity to, again, plug a new player into the lineup and see if he could help. And they elected to go with the same group. So I'm always one that believes that the coach's deployment of players tells you everything you need to know about what they're thinking. The fact that Akito Hirose is here and available and not being used, I just get the sense that Rick Tocchet is, he had the words about his fitness in the preseason. And I think maybe last year, those 7 games when he came up, keep the level of competition in mind. It was garbage time across not across the league, but certainly the games that the Canucks were involved in. And yeah, Hirose looked all right, but I mean, these are the coaches. They go over the tape. They know what they're looking for. And there's something that's keeping Akito Hirose out of this lineup when he's here on an option for the Vancouver Canucks. So I do think that in the short term, unless guys play themselves out of the lineup, it's going to be more of Juleson and Friedman, and the other guys are going to sit and watch.
Wallannen's injured. Jet Wu got injured yesterday. There's not a lot of options.
Well, but you still have, you call it a guy that the coach doesn't think is in shape and refusing to play him. Surely there's a better option.
Is there though?
Surely.
Like Wallanen and Wu would be the first guys you go to, wouldn't they? Like, who else is down there?
Well, and remember, like, Guillaume Brisebois is a totally forgotten man in all of this.
Yeah.
And injured in that final week of the preseason and has been skating off and on, but is dealing with concussion issues and isn't an option now. So, I mean, I just point that out because I think he too would be in this conversation, but he's not available to the Vancouver Canucks either right now.
Yeah. Are Irwin and Johansson hurt too? Because I'm just wondering if we're spitballing here that the coach absolutely has no use for him, would he have any kind of use for victorious Matt Irwin or Philip Johansson? Or, I mean, they've called up McWard here too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So why not play him if you don't have use for the other guy? Jeff, an interesting comment from Tocchet Friday after the win in Seattle. Everybody is waiting for us to fall apart. Tells me that he's paid attention to some of the conversation around the Vancouver Canucks out there. And I guess as a former media panelist, we shouldn't be surprised there. What did you make of that remark?
Yeah, a lot of what you did, that these guys tell you they don't pay attention to the media until they do, and they know exactly what's being said and written about them. It's funny that it came after a good win and a good team win with performances from the depth guys. Like, I could have almost felt that being used as a distraction ploy after the game in Colorado, right? Like, if you're trying to take some of the heat off your players, you throw out that sort of comment. But he saved it for a win. So the timing, I think, was more curious than anything. But this sense that, yeah, people on the outside think that maybe this has been a mirage or the fast start. And again, they weren't going to win 12 of every 16 games they played. They just happened to go 12-3-1 out of the gate. So there is going to be a little bit of regression. We've used that word an awful lot. I think we're seeing that in the here and now, but I don't know. Like, is anybody truly believing that the bottom is going to fall out on the Vancouver Canucks? Like, I think that there's enough there with their top end players, whether it's Quinn Hughes, whether it's Thatcher Demko, whether it's JT Miller. Like, it feels hard to believe that, right now we're watching Elias Pettersson go through a tough time, but those other guys have still kept their games at extremely high levels. And I think that there's enough there to stabilize that the idea of the bottom falling out of the Vancouver Canucks, I'm not sure that I'm buying that. So, to me, it was just more the timing and sort of playing that card after a win was what surprised me the most.
Hey, if they have 5-5 and 6-4 10-game stretches the rest of the season, they'll have the last laugh because they're going to be comfortably in the playoffs.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Again, those either huge injuries or 5-game losing streaks plus are the two things that tend to derail teams who got off to as good a start as the Vancouver Canucks. Lastly, Jeff, the week ahead here. Anaheim Tuesday at home, Vegas at home on Thursday. What do you make of the week they're facing here?
Yeah, well, the Oilers didn't do them any favors because I think the Ducks, look, Anaheim was a nice story in the early going. They have sort of found their level now, and so they're not quite the San Jose Sharks, but the Canucks better bounce back. And, if they lose to the Sharks and the Ducks in consecutive games, then I think some of these questions are fair. I don't know that necessarily means the bottom's falling out, but opportunity presenting itself. It's Hockey Fights Cancer Night on Tuesday at Rogers Arena. And of course, we all remember last year's Hockey Fights Cancer Night. I think it was December 3rd, Arizona in town. And that was Brock Besser was hours away from being a healthy scratch because of his just ineffectiveness at that point in the schedule. And Bruce Boudreau, again, the whole storyline was he didn't know it was Hockey Fights Cancer Night. Besser ended up scoring that night. We remember his big reaction. Fast forward a year, and here he is tied for the NHL goal scoring lead. So a remarkable redemption story coming off the 2 the other night in San Jose for Brock Besser. So I think it's an opportunity. I mean, the Ducks obviously won't be happy with what happened to them in Edmonton. They got pummeled there. John Gibson came on in relief. I assume that they'll see John Gibson as the starter, but the Canucks shouldn't be worrying too much about the Ducks. Focus internally and just try to figure this thing out and get it moving in the right direction. And then, of course, that sets up Thursday with the first look at the Stanley Cup champs, the Vegas Golden Knights, and their season has kind of mirrored the Canucks, right? Like they got out of the gates with 11-0 at one point, but they had done so much of that at home. And much of November, they've been out on the road. When they arrive in Vancouver, that'll be 8 of 9 games away from T-Mobile. And, they have scuffled along a little bit. They got shut out the other night at home by Arizona. So, it wasn't just the Canucks losing to San Jose. Arizona's a better team than the Sharks, but Vegas got shut out by the Arizona Coyotes. So when they arrive here on Thursday, that'll be 3-4 for them. They're in Calgary and Edmonton before then. But wouldn't it be terrific if the Canucks and Vegas are still separated by a point or tied for the division? Like, again, we've talked in recent weeks about games with significance and heft and all that. Like, I think that should be one. It would be just the first visit of the season by the defending Stanley Cup champs, but the fact that you're right there neck and neck with them. So curious to see what the Canucks do on Tuesday. How do they respond to this loss in San Jose? And then ultimately on to Vegas on the Thursday night, or against Vegas on Thursday, and into Calgary for a rematch with the Flames on Saturday night.
Could have an 8-1-1 home record before they face the Vegas Golden Knights if they're able to beat the Ducks. That'd be something to defend on their home ice after a really nice start to the season there.
Well, just wait till the 9-0 on the road Kings get here. That would be quite a clash. Wonderful stuff.
Well, and unfortunately, they don't see the LA Kings until February 29th.
At all? In either market?
Nope. And then they see them 4 times in 16 games. So you think about if the Canucks and Kings are on a collision course in the 2-3 in the Pacific Division, they're going to see each other 4 times between February 29th and the end of the season, and then possibly a best of 7. Again, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But yeah, it's been a quirky schedule. They're finished with San Jose before Christmas. Edmonton's made both of its visits already this season. The Kings are they're out there. They're playing in a different league, and they'll return to the National Hockey League in late February for a matchup with the Vancouver Canucks.
That's probably best because you don't want to face them right now. So let them cool off. Let them have their time.
Absolutely.
Circle back around a little later.
And 4 times in 16 games, then potentially in a best of 7. Good thing they don't have a Dustin Brown type player.
True.
That annoyance accidentally on purpose falling on your goaltender all the time. Jeff, wonderful stuff. Thanks for this. We'll catch up Friday.
All right, guys. Sounds good.
This clip brought to you by Betway. Must be 19 plus to play. Please play responsibly.